Hello everyone, today I'm out driving a car that here in the UK has been something of a unicorn. A left-hand drive only model that was actually a really popular little car in Europe but sadly completely missed in the UK. After 3 decades, today I finally get a drive in the Mk1 Renault Twingo. It's the latter half of the 1980s and it's all change at Renault. The company has been state-owned since the end of World War II, but privatisation is over the horizon, as is the Mk1 Renault Clio, the small hatchback set to replace the ageing but still very popular Renault 5. Now Renault do see a gap in the market for a more budget-oriented model. The problem is with a small budget car is that you've still got all that cost of research and development and production, and there isn't always a lot of margin left in the product, and sadly the concept was shelved. The end. Except that's not really how the story ended. At this point enter the new head of design at Renault, Patrick Leclermont. Now under Patrick's time there were a whole raft of very interesting cars, my own Mk1 Coupe, and towards the latter end of his tenure at Renault was the Velsatis and Aventime. When Patrick arrived, one of the first things he did is he wanted to see what projects Renault had in the pipeline, and he soon discovered that there was a couple of cars locked away in storage. These were monobox small concept cars. So a monobox like the Renault Espace, where rather than the traditional 3-box saloon you basically have a pointy bit at the front and a big box behind it. The monobox is a way of maximising space inside the car, something which is quite useful if you're trying to build a car in a very small footprint. So the two models that he had brought to the design studio, one was a model designed by Marcello Gandini, and the second an in-house design that actually looked very similar to the final concept, albeit a little bit more angular at the front and a little less characterful. And with that, the project name W60 became the Twingo, combination of the twist, the swing and the tango, apparently giving it its fun name. And that's really what this car was all about. Patrick wanted this little car to have character. Gone were the square front headlamps, in came the round frog eye style lights, and with a small grille it really gave the car a characterful face. The interior again, really they could have just called this car the TARDIS, because I don't think I've ever been in a small car that feels as spacious as what this does inside. Again, plenty of glass areas so the car feels really bright. This one is a couple of years into production. We've still got this sort of red golf ball sized hazard warning button on the top of the dash, and we've got these sort of turquoisey colour switches, window winders and door pulls inside the car. I have seen some with other bright colours as well. Same thing could be said for the upholstery in these cars. Again, we had some quite bright and colourful patterns. This car's got a sort of purpley blue colour. Again, I think I have seen some brighter colours in some of the very early cars which launched back in 1993. clay on font again. So I've already had Joe's Renault 11 out on here, which is a clay on font engine incidentally. Then it got a reprieve with the 9 and the 11. Again, the clay on font engine was just about all but dead and buried. And then they used a 1.2 litre version for the Twingo. So again, very simple 8-valve 4-cylinder engine. I think it was around 55 horsepower in this configuration, but again, it's enough for this little car. Again, incredibly, the way it's packaged, I mean, I can actually see the ground through the engine bay, which in a small modern car, usually you can't get anything, you wouldn't be able to get a hand in to work on anything, but yeah. And the engine actually sits sort of in line with this bulkhead here, and obviously this airbox does sort of tuck under the windscreen a little bit. Obviously, being a monobox design, everything is sort of very cab forward in here. But yeah, everything's nice and simple. As we come round to the rear end of the Twingo, with this very upright rear end, that again maximising space in this car. So you wouldn't expect the boot to be huge in here. Again, it's not actually a bad size for the classic car, but Renault were very, very clever with the design on this car. So we've actually got this bench seat here, which I believe, yep, slides forward. So actually you could still actually sit in the back of there and get your legs in, even in that driving position, which is quite surprising. But then it's actually quite a good size. I'd say actually it would easily rival the class above. Now, you'll have to forgive me, I am doing this for the first time, but these seats again, those can be folded down like so. In the middle, tip the whole seat up, and then you've got a van. Incidentally, they did actually do a van variant of these cars as well. Incidentally, Twingo can do far more than be a van though. Bear with. Yep, your Twingo can be a bed. I'm about 5'9", my feet are not quite touching the dashboard, and yeah, this isn't actually bad. Obviously these don't go completely flat, but they're not far off. Hey, you could camp out in this if you had to. Everything was done to keep production costs down. One engine, one trim level. Tinted glass wasn't always standard on small cars in this era, but what Renault did is they decided rather than having two kinds of glass, they would just opt for one with a tint. This enabled them to again keep the cost down, getting tinted glass for only a little bit more than what clear glass would have cost. Many of these cars had fabric sunroofs. In fact, I was of the understanding that you either got a sunroof or air conditioning, although that said, this car doesn't seem to have either. There was no dull colours available on the Twingo at launch. You had coral red, which is the colour that this car once was. It is starting to look a little bit pink these days, but I think we can forgive that after almost 3 decades. Coriander green was another very 1990s looking colour, which really suits these cars. My favourite, probably Indian yellow. The car really pops in that colour. And then there was sea blue, or was it? Because, yeah, to my eyes it looked purple. Now apparently someone at Renault at the time didn't like the purple. In fact, I think in some cultures it's symbolic of suffering. Not the thing you want on your joyful little fun car. So basically they pitched the colour again, didn't actually change the colour but just changed the name, and amazingly got it through. Now later on in the Twingo's life, the Mk1 did go through 4 different phases, and by the time they got to phase 4, the cars had 16 valve engines, body colour bumpers, certainly not as bright. You could get the sunroof, but it was a twin glass sunroof. You could get the ultra luxurious Initial Paris trim, which was very reminiscent of the Monaco trim in the Renault 5 and the Baccara in the Mk1 Clio. Renault were actually very good at making small budget cars but with incredibly luxurious interiors. And one way for maximising space in any small car is to push the wheels out to the corners. The other good point about this in the case of the Twingo was the aesthetic look of it as well. Patrick didn't like the narrower track of some of the Renaults that had gone before, so on the Twingo the track was widened. In fact, it actually ended up with a track that I believe was easily as wide, if not wider, than that of the original Renault Clio. Now the car originally didn't come with any anti-roll bars. Joe did find his Twingo to be a little bit soft, shall we say, a little bit roly-poly, so he's modified the springs on this car so it does actually ride a little bit firmer than the standard car would. Again, the steering is unassisted. Again, it sort of saves cost by not having power steering, and it is quite a small light car. The turning circle is good, although not amazing for a car in this category. And the 1.2 litre engine, again, pulls reasonably well. It's no rocket ship. I'd say it actually feels surprisingly nippy from rest when you first pull away. Admittedly though, you do feel like you're going a little bit quicker in the car, because every time you glance at the speedo, you notice that the speed is in kilometres per hour. Now on a lot of Renaults with digital instruments, you can change it to miles per hour, but I'm not sure if that's the case on this vehicle, or at least I certainly haven't seen any obvious way of changing the units. In France, these cars were a huge hit, and in fact many people love these cars so much that they got handed down through generations. In fact, I interviewed a guy a few years ago who just imported a Twingo into the UK, and I think that car had come down through 3 generations, ending up at the man's granddaughter eventually. Now people do have a real different relationship with cars in France, and they do sort of make them one of the family and keep them until they don't drive anymore. Now thankfully, after the Twingo turned 30 years old a couple of years ago, these cars have started to gain quite a cult following, and a lot of them have been imported into the UK now, and there's actually a really thriving Renault Twingo community out there. So yeah, if you do fancy importing a Twingo and you want some advice, there are plenty of forums which you can join to find out more information. Now we did actually get some Twingos sold here in Right Hand Drive in the UK, but they were the Mk2 car. The Mk2 car was far more conventional, based on a cut down Mk2 Clio platform. 3rd generation Twingo, again sold in the UK, but that was a rear engine car, and very different again. Now quite recently Renault were really diving quite deep into their heritage. Now Renault have just released the all-electric Renault 5, which even people who don't like EVs, people are sort of getting quite swept away by the styling of that car. I think that's going to be a huge hit. The next one due is the Renault 4, again another car inspired by a classic Renault, again all electric, and there is actually an electric Twingo in the pipeline, and the initial shots that we're seeing of that car look a lot like this original Twingo. So yeah, Renault were really looking to capitalise on the popularity and nostalgia of some of these cars. If you would like to see early access to more car reviews like this, do consider channel membership. For a mere £2.99 a month, or the cost of a cup of coffee, you could be enjoying early access as well as some exclusive members only content. If you've enjoyed the video, do please like, comment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone for watching, and a big thank you to Joe for loaning me this car.